So how does it feel when you look back at this? This is a great event for so many of us dying to see these shows in their entirety for years. This is like the Dead Sea Scrolls have come to life of
Well,
hip.
It is fascinating how many people over the years have heard about the shows and asked about them and asked about whether or not they would ever be available. And it was always a matter of appropriate clearances, and it's wonderful to do them now at last, because for me, looking back on those shows, it is a wonderful nostalgic rush, and the shows have a remarkable retro appeal to them that I don't think you get out of most variety shows. In other words, Playboy's Penthouse and Playboy After Dark, which were made in the first shows were made. Playboy's Penthouse was made in Chicago in 59 and 60.
Right.
And then out here in Los Angeles, Playboy After Dark, which was essentially the same show, was done in 68 and 69. And unlike most, because the notion, the concept behind the show was really, instead of simply putting the talent on the stage and having you watch it in effect from an audience, we turned it into a party.
Literally a party that we all wanted to be at. This was the party America. When we read the magazine, we wanted to know. The magazine was a wish book for dreamers, continues to be. Finally, you showed us what it could be in 3D.
It is remarkable with the two shows in their particular time frame how they reflect the times. In other words, and you don't get that from a regular variety show. You really do get a sense that you are stepping into a party from the early 1960s or the latter 1960s, and the difference between the two is remarkable, because the social sexual revolution that changed everything in the 60s really took place in the middle 1960s. Yeah. So what you get in Playboy's Penthouse is a sense of what it was like back in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And you see the future and a whole new youth generation in the latter shows.
It's like the discovery of the sexual revolution, and then we see what has happened. We come and visit 8 years later, and this is the change that is there. Let's go back to the beginning in '59. The magazine is 6 years old at this point. How does the idea even come to you to do a television show?
Well, we had just celebrated our 5th anniversary, and in the summer of 1959, as a celebration for that, we held a jazz festival in Chicago, what turned out to be, as a matter of fact, what Leonard Feather called the greatest single weekend of jazz in the history of the music. And we had everybody there.
Remind us of some of the people who were at that.
Well, about the only two who were not there, because they had both passed away in the years right before, were Charlie Parker Bird and Billie Holiday, two of my special favorites. But we put together on one long weekend at the Chicago Stadium in the summer of 1959 a show that included Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, the Dizzy Gillespie Group, Miles Davis and his group, Dave Brubeck with Paul Desmond in the group, Cannonball Adderley, June Christie, Sarah Vaughan, 3 big bands, the Count Basie Band and Duke Ellington's band and Stan Kenton's band. It was the most memorable aggregation on a single weekend, I think, ever in the history of the music, and will never be surpassed because those giants are gone.
That is jazz heaven,
Yes.
know.
And for a kid who grew up as I did, in which the music represented a certain kind of freedom and sophistication that I didn't know in my own life, to be able to put that together was one of the high points of my life up to that point.
Yeah.
I started the magazine on no money in 1953, and within the space of half a dozen years, my whole life had changed. I was then the editor-publisher of the most successful men's magazine in the world.
Right.
Started on no money. And it was in 1959, quite literally, that I came out from behind the desk and started living the life. I reinvented myself and became, in effect, Mr. Playboy.
The figurehead, everything would follow because you stepped to the forefront. We got to see your life basically in the pages of the magazine to some extent, more and more so in those years.
And much of it was quite conscious. I had done the same thing once before when I was a kid. When I was in high school, I was rejected by a girlfriend that I had a crush on. And I reinvented myself and started referring to myself as Hef instead of Hugh.
You were Hep at the time.
I was Hep. I signed a little. I did a record column for this school paper called Platter Patter, and signed it Hep.
The first reinvention
of Hugh Hefner.
Of Hugh Hefner.
Right. And I think we all do that to some extent. We're handed a life by our family and peers and by society at large. And if you were smart enough, you take a hold of your life and try to turn it into who you want to be. And that certainly in a most dramatic way is what my life was all about.
And in this case, in '59, you got to have a TV show to really
do it.
To show people exactly how you'd redefined yourself.
And I think it was the Jazz Festival that really put the notion in my mind. And in that, I had just come out of a broken marriage, and all the props were in place. And it was in that period that I started driving the 300 SL, which you see at the beginning of Playboy's Penthouse. That's me behind the wheel.
That is you, in fact, driving down Lakeshore Drive.
That's correct. Yeah. The pipe. Now, the myth is that I took up the pipe as something to do with my hands during the television show.
I had heard that.
Well, the reality is, it was a good prop, but the reality is I started smoking the pipe sometime in the months immediately prior to that.
Is that right?
And I think I did it simply as a prop. I mean, I think it was part of the same thing with the smoking jacket and the Mercedes-Benz and the pipe. I think it was just part of the affectation of becoming who I wanted to be.
Right.
I mean, it's in a very real way. It's like Archie Leach becoming
Cary Grant.
Cary Grant. I think you create the persona that you want to have. And what, of course, is unique about my life is that I managed to do it in such a public way.
Yeah.
Use the magazine as a vehicle for that purpose, and in the process, pointed a direction for other guys and women in terms of how you could live your life.
Well, you, by making these shows, in fact, another name for the first show is the Penthouse Party. Playboy's Penthouse, or Penthouse Party, it was known in some markets. But I think I was saying to you earlier as we were watching some of these were the kind of parties I know you imagined were going on and you wanted, before you created Playboy, because this is one of my favorite images of you, is longing and looking in the lights of the skyscrapers of the city of Chicago and imagining what's going on in there. That's what's going on in there, these parties that we're seeing on these shows.
Well, I'm a kid who was raised in a very typical Midwestern Methodist home with a lot of repression, and I escaped very early on into romantic dreams that were fueled by the movies and the music of my childhood. In other words, I grew up during the Depression. I was born in 1926 and grew up with the images from the past, from the Roaring '20s, Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby, the Jazz Age, as the party that I thought I had missed.
Yeah.
So I think to some extent, in a very real way, I think I created a world through the magazine and then the life that it gave me for the party that I did miss. And parties themselves then became thematic for my life and were a thematic response to Puritan repression. So you will see throughout my life, both in the television shows that we do and also life at the mansion, parties really are thematic. And what it is simply a symbolic way of celebrating life. Saying we're here for a little while, let's make the most of it, let's do it with some style. It was also a time in which, after World War II, there were a lot of pressures from the government and from society at large to get everybody back into the house, get women out of the workforce where they had been during World War II, get everybody married, get everybody moved into the suburbs, get that right job, raise the 2.1 children, and it worked for everybody. But I saw other possibilities in terms of life, and I think that was what Playboy was all about. Playboy, from the very beginning, was the first magazine for single guys, a lifestyle magazine that defined what it meant to be a guy.
Exactly.
And I think that in that same time frame, my own life, took that direction, and the television show was the living embodiment of that. Quite literally, in the space of a handful of months, right after the Jazz Festival, I started hosting Playboy's Penthouse. I purchased the first Chicago mansion on
North State Parkway in
right.
the legendary first Playboy mansion.
And then I bought that in February, or in December of 1959, and in February of 1960 we opened the first Playboy Club. So within the space of just a handful of months, my life changed completely.
It's an enormous year in your life.
Yes.
It's a year that was, almost unmatched in terms of
I think,
laying the cornerstones of what would be the Playboy mythos.
Well, I think the only parallel to it would be the start of the magazine itself in 1953. But this was the real reinvention of the lifestyle itself, and the television show reflects that. So what you get in the television show is more than just a variety show. It is capturing a moment in time in society and in terms of my life, that spoke to the changing of the times.
Women we see on the set are in fact women you're dating.
Yes.
This is the drinks that they, as people who watch, the thrill is people are really getting loaded. People are getting loaded in the course of a taping.
Because the show was done in such a relaxed and unprofessional way, we served real liquor in the drinks, so that you can see in some of the shows, because the shows were not always shot, the segments were not shot in chronological order. We shot the show throughout a day and evening, and timed them for when the acts were available, because a number of the celebrities and performers who appeared on the shows were working in Chicago at the time, and they would come over at an appropriate moment and do their little segments. So you see some instances where, when the shows were put together, they were not in the sequence in which they'd been shot. So you will see in certain instances where people were drinking real drinks throughout the entire day and evening, and seemingly sobering up.
How long of a day did you put in to make these first shows? Because, I mean, first of all, I should ask you about becoming a television host. It's something that, how did that occur to you to step? You could have hired someone else as a front man for your own, for Playboy.
And there was a reason for it. The notion behind the show was, the magazine was hugely successful. We were printing over 1 million copies a month by 1960, and selling almost all of them. But we were having problems getting advertising. And I was looking for a promotional vehicle that would make the magazine more mainstream. And that was the notion behind Playboy's Penthouse. And it worked. In other words, within the space of a very short period of time, the combination of the television show and the arrival of the Playboy clubs gave a legitimacy to the magazine that had not been there before. And it became hugely successful then in the 1960s. In the 1960s, the circulation climbed from 1 million copies a month to, by the early 1970s, 7 million copies a month.
7 million, somewhere between.
Unthinkable.
It's unthinkable. That just doesn't happen in magazine publishing. And a huge jump by the time we get to Playboy After Dark, almost 6 million at that point, in the space of 8 years. But to go back to Playboy's Penthouse, it aired on a hand. I guess syndication was in its infancy at the time. It's not, and it aired in several markets, but not widespread across the country.
Well, it was in the major markets across the country, but not in the South. And we knew that we were not going to be able to sell the magazine or sell the show in the South because of a decision that I made related to the party concept. There were no racial distinctions in
No.
the show.
The first integration, equality, people of different colors at a party enjoying the same thing.
Well, what made it particularly unique and controversial was because it did appear to be a party in my home, and it was a party in my in the Playboy's penthouse that was very much like a real party at the mansion. So distinctions of race were simply not there, and in portions of the country, most especially in the South, that was not acceptable and still very controversial. Nat Cole, who appeared on the very first show, had his own show for a time in the middle 1950s, and it did not last because he couldn't get advertisers. And he couldn't get advertisers because, as he said, Madison Avenue was afraid of the dark.
Huh.
And what that meant was that segregation was still the way of things in major portions of the South. So we broke that color line, and I'm proud that we did.
You blew holes through it. In fact, in that very first show, he seemed so pleasantly surprised by everything that's going on the show when he comes in, and he's at this point at the top of his game. I mean, that the bookings you had in Chicago, I think, would boggle the minds of talent bookers for talk shows today, of the Tonight Show or Letterman Show.
Well,
unbelievable talent on the same show.
When we booked the show, we simply gave them a standard fees, and there was nothing special at all. And I think the reason that we were able to get away with it was because of the popularity of the show. No, I'm sorry, the popularity really of the magazine, the clout of the magazine.
Yeah.
And that in turn, gave us. And by that point in time, of course, a number of the people in show business were also good personal friends.
Well, I thought it was very interesting. The very first guest on that first show is Lenny Bruce, and I thought you couldn't have scripted that better in retrospect, to have him come on and take note of what was going on. And you two have a really great discussion about what the show really is about to be. And he pronounces it honest, and how great that is. That and I think that was what a great stamp of approval.
Well, he did the show as a personal favor. Lenny, we ran a story on Lenny in the latter 1950s, and it was the first national exposure that he got. Some friends of mine who ran a Chicago club called the Cloister were looking for new acts, and I went out to San Francisco with them to look at Lenny's show, and Lenny was, his mother, Sally Marr, was at the door taking admissions, and I'd heard a great deal about the show and about Lenny, and it blew me away.
Yeah.
And so when he came to Chicago to work the Cloister, we recorded the entire show for a week, and then from that published a piece on him that turned out to be the first national exposure that he got, and we became close friends.
Very close friends, to the point where when he was having legal difficulties, you stepped in and sent your own attorney in to bail him out.
Well, we did what we could for him, because in the 1960s, reflective of how the social sexual values were changing, there was also a great deal of controversy in terms of censorship, etc. And Playboy was a part of that good fight, and there were casualties to it. And one of the major early casualties was Lenny himself. They drove him out of the business and drove him to his death. And we did what we could for him as we went. We actually published in the magazine his autobiography at the time of where he was fighting the battles and the controversy, and then published the autobiography, which was titled How to Talk Dirty and Influence People.
That's right.
That was published at first in magazine form, and then in
Playboy
book form.
Playboy Press, in
Yes,
fact. Yeah.
And in the years that followed, I became very close to the entire family, to Sally Mars. I just got a Christmas card from Kitty Bruce, the daughter.
Well, Sally Marr, in fact, appears on After Dark, and you do a bit of a tribute, because Lenny dies in '66, so somewhere in between the two shows, we've lost him. I think we have to address probably one of the most famous theme songs which, God, does it sound good on these shows. There it is at the very beginning with Cy Coleman, the man who wrote it, is performing it on the very first show, and what a great performer he was. But tell us about that, because people love this song, you know. It's so sexy.
Well, I was looking for a special theme that would combine jazz with a string ensemble, so it would have a beat against a romantic theme. And we arranged with a full orchestra, 40 pieces, part of the Symphony Orchestra, as a matter of fact, from Chicago. And Cy, who had written a number of very popular songs, was a friend, agreed to create what was called Playboy's Theme. And what I asked for was, there was a very popular song that Andre Previn had done called Like Young.
Really?
And it had a similar kind of jazz melody line against strings. And I said, this is what I'm looking for. And so I worked on it. I liked the results very much. We recorded it. It became hugely popular and was covered. We used it as the theme for the television show, and it became very popular and was covered by a number of other, Mancini and Count Basie and a number of other groups. I got a telegram from Andre Previn, who said that he loved Playboy's Theme, but he thought the Cy should have called it Like Young.
Oh, no, yeah. That's funny. Well, it lives on. It in fact, becomes the theme for After Dark and everything else. In fact,
yes.
It's updated in the 70s in the ABC specials. It's a disco beat.
Well, it really is Playboy's Theme.
It really is. Also in the very first show, you unveil the bunny costume for the first time in the first series. I don't know if we'll see it here, but down the road perhaps. But that was, of course, a seminal thing. But as I remember, you couldn't show all of the costume. It was considered too scandalous. There was some fur that.
Yes, they added the fur for television, although in the again a reflection of how the times were changing. In the years immediately after that, the bunny costume in all its glory appeared regularly on television shows. And parodies of same with Bob Hope and Flip Wilson and a number of other comics.
It was an instant icon. The funny thing too is you had purchased the mansion in Chicago, and it was empty. You've told me this before, and people would, after the tapings, end up going back to the actual Chicago mansion. You'd continue the party.
Yes.
What we're seeing on TV is just a startup here.
Yes. In other words, the party on TV. Ended at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, sometimes midnight, and then we would all go over to the Playboy Mansion and throw a real party.
Unbelievable. Yeah. But thanks for sharing. It was like a peephole into possibility, that show. And the same thing that happened in '68. You made the decision to do it again, and this time you'd have to go to Los Angeles to tape it.
Well, we had opened, the Playboy clubs were hugely popular in the 1960s. We had opened a club in Los Angeles, and I had an apartment, a penthouse apartment appropriately enough, in a building on Sunset Boulevard, the Playboy building, with the club downstairs and my apartment on the top. And in that time frame then in 1968 and '69, we did a new full-color version of Playboy's Penthouse and called it Playboy After Dark. Pad.
Yeah.
And
a new generation. Now this is, amazingly, as we spoke earlier, you're combining sort of the hep jazz lounge culture of the 50s moving into the 60s, and suddenly you meet psychedelic rock. We see the amazing bookings, and I think on one of these shows we'll see a duet between Linda Ronstadt, the earliest proponent of country rock, I think, with Billy Eckstine.
Yes.
Doing a Billie Holiday tribute. I mean, there are things that go on in these shows that boggle the mind even now. Thrilling to watch.
Well, we were able to do things on the show because we didn't have any networks to deal with, so I was really running the show pretty much to suit myself.
And syndication was the real deal at this
yes,
point. Yeah.
Yes, and it made it more fun. We didn't have to talk to the suits, and it is again both Playboy's Penthouse and Playboy After Dark are a real reflection of. It's a step back into another time. It has a wonderful sophisticated retro appeal, and of course for me, very, very personal because it's filled with wonderful memories. When we were doing Playboy After Dark, I met on the show a young lady on the second show called Barbie Benton.
I think we've heard of her. Yes,
sitting right there behind her.
She, in fact, was hired as one of the extras.
Yes.
And you had sort of a moment of kismet there. And again, this is a relationship that changes your life in new ways. Where we're sitting now, in fact, I mean, did she not?
She found this house,
the Playboy Mansion,
the Los Angeles mansion. Yes, she was a student at UCLA in pre-med, and a model, and worked as an extra on the show. And I saw her on I think the second day of shooting, and was smitten, and pursued her, and that turned into a relationship that lasted for 8.5 years. And it was Barbie who was really responsible for the Los Angeles mansion. She was looking for a place. I had this apartment on Sunset Boulevard, but for home entertaining, you really needed something larger. So, and she was looking for a place where we could play tennis.
Right.
And she found this wonderful piece of property, and I acquired that in 1971, and it was part of the change in life. I think increasingly in that time frame, I was literally splitting my time, and that began really with Playboy After Dark.
I was going to ask you about that because in '68 you were still fairly rooted, and I mean the headquarters of Playboy to this day remains in Chicago. But at this point, what was interesting about this show being taped out here is I think all of your Hollywood dreams were calling you. I mean, you were raised on the movies, and suddenly you had a reason to come out here.
Coming to the West Coast was natural because this was where the dreams came from. In other words, the dreams came from the movies. So Hollywood had this very special kind of significance for me. I had come out on a number of occasions in the 1959, in the latter 50s and early 1960s, and then once we opened the club out here, had an apartment. So when I started doing the television show in '68, I literally was splitting my time with about half the time in Chicago and half the time in Los Angeles. That made the purchase of a home out here more logical. And I think it was the beginning then really of coming home to the place where my dreams came from.
Your dreams came from here. You came out almost on a weekly basis, didn't you?
It was every other week.
You do?
Yes, and there was. I would come out every other week and do 2 shows back to back in 2 days.
And this is the birth of, because at some point you got tired of normal plane travel somewhere in this time zone.
Well, I really started thinking about getting my own plane even before it was part of. The real change came out of 1966. I had been working around the clock on the Playboy philosophy. And we opened the London Club in the summer of 1966, and I saw the future there. The miniskirt had just arrived. Swinging London was really swinging. As a matter of fact, there were a number of major motion pictures being made that year in London. Casino Royale, and a number of others. So a lot of friends from Hollywood were in London at the time. Woody Allen.
Sure. He wrote Casino Royale, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was there. As a matter of fact, I visited that film on the set while I was out there. David Niven was there, Ursula Andress, Peter Sellers, all of whom became good friends. And I saw the future, and I'd been writing about it in the Playboy philosophy and making a case for the sexual revolution. I felt that it was time to come out from behind the desk once again and start living the life. So when I went back to Chicago, I literally made plans. I stopped doing the editorial series right then, and started making plans for the television show, and actually made plans for the purchase of the plane. We didn't get the delivery on the plane until 1970, but the real plans were made in 66, 67.
And in fact, didn't we say, well, there's a great episode, Sonny and Cher appear on and they are, you have the model right there,
Yes.
and you are explaining, they're asking all these questions. Cher wants to know if there's a hot tub, and but it's great TV, but it's all right there. But by the time you were up and running with it, was about 1970 with the plane.
Yes.
So the show was actually coming to an end, but by that time,
Yes.
you're wildly in love with Barbie.
Yes.
And there's no turning back. And you would be living in both houses for the better part of the next decade, I guess.
Yes. Well, I went back and forth between the two cities between 68 and really 75. And by 1975, I had so fallen in love with the lifestyle out here that I simply stopped going back.
Yeah.
There was a period of referred to as Captain's Paradise when I was seeing two main ladies, Barbie out here and Karen Christie in Chicago.
A girl in each port, and a man hopping on and off an airplane very often. And
well, if one remembers the wonderful British comedy called Captain's Paradise with Alec Guinness, we know that that kind of lifestyle has its own downside, and you pay a price for it, and I did.
Fairly exhausting.
Yes.
It's a bedroom farce, but instead of running in and out of doors, you're
Yes,
hopping on and
yes.
off a big bunny.
Yes.
Basically the.
But it was a wonderful time, and I loved the lifestyle out here, and you know, by the middle 70s, I'd really made the commitment full time here, and eventually. The Chicago mansion, I donated the Chicago mansion to the Art Institute.
It became
in
Hefner
Chicago.
Hall.
It became Hefner Hall.
Yeah, so college boys could actually live also in the place they've always dreamed of.
Unfortunately, they gave up when the Art Institute took it over for dormitories and schools. They eliminated the swimming pool and the underwater bar and the bowling alley and all the fun parts.
It lost everything. And
Yeah.
the other thing is interesting, you're playing a lot of games, a lot of party games on these programs, which I thought was very hip. You know, these are really parties, and you know, you're having word association games. And any favorite, because boy, again, the pantheon of guests who come through. Sammy Davis Jr. performs on both of these series.
Yes.
And brings down the house both times.
In 1960, we had stopped doing the first season, and Sammy came into town, and he wanted to do the show. And I obliged him. We literally put the set back together. It was originally appearing at WBKB, I think, in Chicago.
It was an ABC affiliate at the time.
It could well be.
Yeah.
At any rate, it was on. The studio was on State Street, right next to the State Lake Theater.
Right.
When Sammy was in town and saying he wanted to do a show, we literally put it together in just a matter of a few days and put the set at CBS, so that and the next 5 shows that we did at the end of that season were shot at CBS.
At the CBS affiliate.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because basically, you know, that first studio you were doing these shows, later it was redesigned for Oprah. That's where Oprah Winfrey came in years later to
It's a small world.
crashing your party, sir, you know. But Sammy was an astonishing talent
Yes.
and a great friend of yours. There's had to be moments that just stand out. I mean, for you, it has to be personal, too, because when you think of your relationships are also going on with these women and these shows. You know?
Well, with the celebrities and the performers, I mean, you're talking.
Things you'll never forget.
Yes, you're talking about instances of people that were my idols when I was a teenager. So it was living out, as much of my life has been, living out, you know, a boy's dream. I think that's what my life is really all about. On occasion, acquaintances have said, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. And my response to that is, the secret is, don't grow up. Hold on to the boy. Hold on to the boy who dreamed the dreams.
Yeah.
Because I think that too often in many lives, maturity brings on a selling out and compromising of the dreams of adolescence, and I think it is those dreams that keep us alive.
This is what we're seeing on the screen. These are the dreams come true for so many boys. That's it.
Myself included.